Good evening. Do you feel like you've got more or less freedom of speech under Prime Minister Keir Starmer? The Americans think that we have a massive problem over here.
And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
Vice President JD Vance raised it again to our Prime Minister's face in the Oval Office.
We do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies, but we also know that there have been infringements on free speech.
And now the Americans are saying no free trade without free speech. If they mean that, then the idea of a Keir Starmer Stasi is going to make us all poorer. In a statement posted on X, the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labour within the US State Department said US-UK relations share a mutual respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. However, as Vice President Vance has said, we are concerned about freedom of expression in the United Kingdom. While recently in the UK, DRL senior advisor Sam Sampson met with, and remember this name, Livia Tisici-Bolt, who faces criminal charges for offering conversation within a legally prohibited buffer zone at an abortion clinic. We are monitoring her case. It is important that the UK respect and protect freedom of expression. So, Livia Tisici-Bolt has been charged and hauled before a court for holding up a sign outside an abortion clinic saying, "Here if you want to talk," which allegedly breached a protected buffer zone outside that facility. So she's pleaded not guilty to these charges, and she's claimed that she had not breached the Public Spaces Protection Order and that she had the right to offer consensual conversations under the Human Rights Act. She's not the only one who's been nicked for this kind of thing. Police seem to have been locking people up for this for years.
What are you here for today?
Physically, I'm just standing here.
Okay. Why here of all places? I know you don't live nearby.
But this is an abortion centre.
Are you praying?
I might be praying in my head out loud.
So I'll ask you once more, will you voluntarily come with us now to the police station?
If I've got a choice, then no.
Okay, well then you're under arrest on suspicion of failing to comply with the Public Spaces Protection Order, which is under the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act 2014.
So the Prime Minister obviously denies that there's any issue with free speech in Britain.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time.
But I think he's wrong. We've got people serving years in prison for social media posts during the summer disorder, which the Prime Minister appeared to demand from judges.
Over 400 people now have been arrested, 100 have been charged, some in relation to online activity, and a number of them are already in court. And I'm now expecting substantive sentencing before the end of this week. That should send a very powerful message to anybody involved, either directly or online.
So there you go. A former Royal Marine was arrested and charged because of comments like this.
And I warned that this type of thing was going to start happening. We, as a community, should not let any of these type people into our valley, okay? We shouldn't let any of these migrants who've just come into the country, okay, settle you in the valleys.
Jamie Michael has since been cleared of all charges, but do you know who reported him to the police? A Welsh Labour Party staff member. The new employment rights bill put forward by Labour potentially lets bar staff, quote, take all reasonable steps to prevent harassment of staff, which apparently could apply to overheard conversations between customers if they overhear, quotes, offensive banter. Right? So we already have 6 pubs a week closing in Britain, and now because Tabitha and Tarquin are offended, we might lose the rest of them. The irony is that it seems that a Pakistani grooming gang and some kind of transsexual paedophile could freely walk into a bar, but if you make a nasty remark about them, then the owner of the Dog and Duck gets sued by a snowflake barmaid. Police detectives knocked on a grandmother's door because apparently she criticised local Labour politicians.
Is it Helen? Helen from the police. you going to speak? Okay. Okay. We'll give you a call on your phone, okay? I'm not going to stand out here if you're not going to speak to me.
Madness. Hertfordshire police knocked on the door of some parents because they dared to criticise their child's school in a private WhatsApp group. They sent 6 police officers round and the parents spent 8 hours in custody. And since, the police have concluded that no further action would be taken, which begs the question, why did you bother in the first place? Then, can you guess what happened when their local MP, Oliver Dowden, who happens to be the former Deputy Prime Minister, spoke out in their favour? Well, he claims that the police said that they'd look at doing him for harassment as well. Remarkable, isn't it? And this is before we've spoken about the hate crime bill the SNP brought into force in Scotland, which could criminalise what you say in your own home. Not even toddlers are immune in Britain anymore. A toddler was accused of being transphobic and booted out of their nursery school. It's all mental. Now, it's all well and good, Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds, who, by the way, is very lucky to still have a job after being caught up in a cash for croissants row that saw business people pay 3,000 quid to have breakfast with him, and then, astonishingly, was forced to apologise for misleading his constituents over his qualifications as a lawyer. Well, according to him, we do have free speech over here. He can say all that he wants. Everything's fine. Oh, and it wasn't even mentioned in the trade talks between Trump and the UK. But he and the Prime Minister, in my opinion, need to wake up, because the world clearly thinks there is a problem with free speech in Britain. Brits think there is a problem with free speech in Britain. And the only people who don't seem to be the ones wearing a red rosette. Let's get the thoughts from our panel this evening. We, of course, have broadcaster and columnist Esther Krakow. We have GB News superstar presenter Alex Armstrong, and also political commentator Jonathan Liss, who I believe I can actually talk to now, even if we can't quite see them. So, Alex, I'll start with you. Do you buy it when Jonathan Reynolds and Keir Starmer say, hey, look, we don't have a problem with free speech in Britain, nothing to see here?
No, I don't believe it at all. I don't think most Brits believe that either, Patrick. The reality is that we all feel that freedom of speech has come under attack in Britain, more so since Labour took office. But the reality is that actually this has been going on for a really long time, since the Conservative Party were in government, where most of these laws derived from in the first place and were weaponised by the Labour Party after that too.
As to your views, I mean, clearly there is a perception all over the world now that Britain has a problem with free speech.
Yes, but that's Britain's problem, not the Americans' problems. The Americans have decided not to say anything about Erdogan in Turkey basically imprisoning his opponent. Trump made, a lot of fanfare over the fact that he's just signed hundreds of millions of dollars worth of weapons to Saudi Arabia, which doesn't have the best human rights record, you might be surprised to hear. The Americans deal with whoever they want to deal with, purely on a rational basis of what suits them.
Why do you think they're so obsessed with us then?
Because, first of all, we kind of seem like the 51st state. And secondly, I think it's a convenient excuse to wrangle out of a free trade deal with the UK, which the Americans, Biden and Obama and Trump, previous sort of administrations have been dragging their feet on. And this is just a convenient excuse.
OK, Jonathan, I'll bring you into this now. I mean, we've got Hertfordshire police knocking on the door of parents for tweeting something in a WhatsApp group. We've obviously got, them then apparently going after the local MP as well, who happens to be the Deputy Prime Minister, saying if you stand up for them, we might do you for harassment as well. I mean, it doesn't really seem very free speechy.
I don't think that is the reason that we're not going to get a free trade deal. I think that we're conflating two separate things. The reason we're not going to get a free trade deal is that Donald Trump does not like free trade. He doesn't believe in free trade. He's literally going to be erecting tariffs to the whole world. And I believe that even countries he has a free trade deal with are not going to be exempted.
But that's telling the world that we have a problem with free speech.
Yes, and this comes to the second part of it. It's complete baloney, Patrick. Look at what the United States is doing right now. Now, I'm not saying for 1 minute that we don't have problems with free speech, and I am actually quite consistent.
You just said it was baloney.
No, it's baloney what they're saying, Alex. Most say, though. The United States believes in free speech. It doesn't actually practice what it preaches. You look at what is happening right now, that you have a French researcher turning up to a US airport, being detained and deported deported on terrorism suspicions because of his social media feed criticising Trump. You have sort of completely innocent people being sent to El Salvadorian torture prisons without any kind of due process. This is not free speech. If you criticise Trump, you have your funding taken away now.
Just on a technicality, just because they don't have a due process doesn't mean they're innocent. Just on a technical note.
No, I didn't say they're innocent. I said there's no due process.
Because seriously, I'm sorry, but I floated this question before, and I'll ask it again. I'm really keen to see what people say in the Your Says about this as well. Do you honestly feel as though you have more or less free speech under Keir Starmer? And I put it to you that people feel, you can argue whether this is true or not, people feel as though there is more of a threat to free speech.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and I think people at home feel that way. I certainly felt that way, and one of the triggering moments for that were the riots. A lot of people were so concerned they were going to be arrested over posts they'd made on social media, and no one really knew what the rules were. The rules seemed to appear overnight, and a lot of people got arrested for them. And I do understand the legislation was written by the Conservative Party, but it wasn't weaponised to the extent that it is today. And I strongly believe that the judiciary in this country and the police in this country have got a wind of power.
I'll tell you what's worse. It's not that people feel like we don't have free speech in this country. People feel like free speech doesn't apply to everyone equally. So for months we watched these sort of pro-Palestine protests happening when you had Jewish shop owners saying, listen, we feel personally attacked, we have to close our shops, we're actually facing harassment and threats, and nothing happened, very little happened to them, even though they had their free speech, which is fine. However, you complain about your school on a WhatsApp group and you have 6 police officers coming up at your door. What people feel like is that the application is not even, and that's a problem because perception is reality.
Because I think that's really interesting. If you think those parents who criticise those police didn't happen to be white Christian, perhaps, people, do you think that there would have been a claim of racism against them?
But the thing is, I don't know.
That seems to be where the line is.
There is a case that the police just did their job. They got a complaint and they investigated it. 6 police seems a bit excessive. I mean, it seemed like they were scared that a couple were going to throw free speech at them.
I'll give you an example of this. Do you remember the Leeds Hare Hills riots that were proper riots? People set a bus on fire.
Yeah.
People set also. I mean, that was absolutely insane, right? And the vast majority of the perpetrators there, and this is purely from going off the video footage that we've seen when we took it live, there were members of a diverse range of ethnic minorities, right, that were doing that. There was a minimal number of arrests and charges that happened there, and I felt that was massively tutored. So it looks as though certain people in certain communities can get away with more stuff than others.
That's just not how the justice system. That's not the evidence of the justice system, Patrick. It's not. We know that the evidence of that is actually the opposite. That people from ethnic minorities are more likely to receive custodial sentences.
You're conflating the amount of crimes disproportionately committed with actually people who are yes.
No, I said that once they're convicted, they're more likely to get custodial.
Not even toddlers are immune at the moment. We saw the quotes unquote transphobic toddler story. I mean, how do you think the Americans feel about that? I mean, they're laughing at us for that.
I think that story just sounds completely extraordinary. So I would have to obviously, know the details of that story.
For instance, you've had actually almost 100 kids.
Yeah.
So under the age of 7 actually excluded. So I know it sounds ridiculous, but actually the facts.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that we don't have a real problem with free speech, and I think it's really important from the left and the right to be consistent about it and say that everyone should have an equal right to be heard. But that's not what is actually being applied, because normally we actually ignore kind of indiscretions on our own side.
That's a good point, Jonathan, because when people were out in the pro-Palestine rallies screaming jihad, the police were out defending their right to free speech.
I think those people, the people who were waving racist placards were arrested.
On a political level, look at it this way, right? Even if you say the police are just doing their job, you had the Prime Minister saying that he couldn't reveal anything about the Axel Rudikubana case because he didn't want to prejudice the jury. However, he basically sort of pre-convicted people that were still going through the judicial process for civil unrest during the Southport riots. He didn't have a problem saying him as the most powerful politician in the country, effectively potentially prejudicing a case against those people, but he was worried about prejudicing a case against someone like Axel Rudikubana. So even politically speaking, it looks like our politicians are happy to prejudice some cases than others. That's what it looks like.
I'm bothered about the perception of Britain around the world at the moment. We know what the Americans are saying. I think you and I occasionally appear on Sky News Australia, okay? And Sky News Australia, every single time I'm on there, they are always banging on about free speech issues in Britain. They can't believe
that. Completely right way.
They can't believe what's going on over here. The perception around the world is that under Keir Starmer, at the moment, there is a massive issue.
There are free speech issues around the world. You have right now in France, which I disagree with, Marine Le Pen being barred from seeking presidential office. I think that was wrong. You have, obviously, and some of these are legitimate, and they can be defended, and some of them I think are absolutely wrong. But what is happening in the United States is worse than anything that's happening here. That's the big issue.
10 years, and we can all feel it.
All right, guys. Well, look, I've got a heck of a lot coming your way. We are going to be joined live in the studio by Paul McCartney and John Lennon. Yeah, the real ones. Seriously, they're here. Especially in the case of John, it's remarkable.
Did you resurrect him?
He's been due an album.
If anyone could do that, it's GB News, let's face it.
But there we go.